гости будет модерировать. As there are 4 chairs on stage, you will sit here in the middle one. Yeah.
Откуда премьер-министр будет идти? Откуда он будет идти? Оттуда?
Ивана, премьер оттуда, да? Оттуда, да?
Да никакой, дайте.
Премьер отсюда будет идти.
Сразу на сцену. Да.
Работает уже?
Заводит?
Работает?
Раз. Что робити з цими дірками в першому ряду? Вірки, где-то. Да. Здравствуйте. Пока садитесь. Вперед, вперед, вот там место резерв, где написано. Резерв, где написано, проходи. Да, Иван. Все, починаем. Да. Можем идти.
Пані та панове, прем'єр-міністр України Mykola Azarov. Ladies and gentlemen, Prime Minister of Ukraine Mykola Azarov.
Слушай, если вдруг у него не будет работать, дадим там.
Хорошо, мне надо сказать.
Добрый день, уважаемые дамы и господа. Я вас приветствую с прекрасной погодой в Крыму.
Crimea, my brief presentation I would like to devote to economic issues. In Ukraine, I'm happy that I can present here the point of view of the government of Ukraine. I'm happy to see you here because such meetings allow us to destroy stereotypes which are embedded in our conscience. Stereotype is a good thing. They make our life easier. They allow us to move forward without thinking a lot in life. But sometimes there are situations, and all people who are car drivers know when the navigator says turn right, but you know perfectly well that your home is in front of you, and you then violate the stereotype. And now when this conference allows you to look at things differently, to hear some different opinions, and to a certain extent to destroy or violate the stereotypes. 2.5 years ago, Ukraine was in a very bad economic crisis. When a year ago I met with the president of Czech Republic, Klaus, he said, Mr. Prime Minister, please tell me how in such a short period of time you managed to come out of this pitch. And the pitch was really very deep. And it was minus 15% of GDP decrease, almost 15% of budget deficit, plenty of debts. And then I told that we managed to succeed because we went against stereotypes. We were doing not what was advised to us. We selected our own way, and it was the correct one. They told us you have to save money, but there's no money, and we increased salaries, increased pensions. They were saying, which Euro 2012 you are talking about? You have no money at all. What could be the Euro 2012? What stadiums, what airports, what bridges, what road junctions are you talking about? And we started constructing all that. And thanks to that, Ukraine managed to come out of the crisis. In 2010, we had 5.6 of the growth rate, and in 2011, 5%. We managed to cope with the inflation, and we managed to lay the stable foundation for the development of Ukraine. That was very difficult, of course. And now, in Ukraine, we have the second wave of the crisis. I would say it's not the second wave, it's just the crisis which is continuing. And if we believe certain forecasts, different economic theories, the theories of Kondratiev, according to that, the crisis will be taking place for 10 years more. But back to this idea, a non-standard approach, the ability to find non-standard solutions is what we need. We need to cope with the next wave of crisis. We need to find the technological solutions which would help us to come out of that crisis. What are the challenges in front of us? For Ukraine, first of all, that's the energy challenge. We do not have enough own natural gas. And we have to pay for gas huge money, which no one sitting here, no country which is present here is paying such a price. Taking into account the Black Sea Agreement, we pay for gas $540 for 1,000 cubic meters. Please raise your hands who is paying the same price. There's no price like that for anyone else. For us, it's a big problem. We have to deplete our currency reserves. We have to put a burden on our population, and such a burden is a big price for energy, and that is why energy issue is a key issue for us. And our task is, within 15 years, Ukraine has to supply its own gas for the domestic market, and we have such reserves. In 15 years, we will manage to have our own gas and oil, which would be enough for our needs. Of course, we are saving gas, and in next year we will reduce the consumption of gas twice. Is that the stereotype about Ukraine which cannot resolve any problem, cannot cope with the problem? Sometimes I'm surprised when I meet some politicians and they give me an advice. And I have a question. Maybe we lack knowledge ourselves, maybe we lack experience, maybe our results certify to the fact that we are failing as the leaders. Why are they courageous enough to give advice? And they give advice which will lead Ukraine to the dead end. But Ukraine is going its own way, and some people do not like it. This year, we started drilling offshore. We executed agreements with the leading energy companies, and this will be discussed at the energy panel. And we are convinced that the efforts put by Ukraine will allow it to respond to that energy challenge. The food security issues, food security issue. We are facing some difficulties in that. First of all, they are related to the fact that Ukrainian village, Ukrainian agricultural complex was not reformed. There were no systemic reforms made. And the changes of the climate that we experience, and that's the drought of 2003, the drought of this year. I can give you a comparison what we did to minimize the impact of climate on our agricultural complex. 2003, there was a serious drought. Until the middle of July, there were no rains starting from spring, and we gathered 23 million tons of grain. That was the lowest harvest you could imagine. We made our conclusions. Now, the 2011-2012 were very difficult years. We had dry autumn. We practically had no rains. And we had no rains till the beginning of June. But we will gather about 47 million tons, 23 million tons and 47 million tons. Is there a difference? That's our response from the point of view of ensuring food security and the efforts put by our government to that. In the nearest 5 years, will take Ukraine to the figure of 100 million tons of grain and will become one of the biggest players in the market environment. For Ukraine, it's a very important topic. Our southeast is where we have chemical industry, metallurgical, mining industries, and that is why the issue of environmental security, the reduction of harmful discharge and transforming to safe technologies is so important for us. I mentioned just 3 issues which are of importance, not just for Ukraine, but for the whole of the world. Ukraine is faced with many more issues and problems, and the reforms that some people are saying that they are not being implemented or that they slowed down, and others criticize us for the fact that they are not consistent. But in fact, we are implementing reforms with the rate which is possible in this situation. There was a lot of criticism addressed to the government on the issue of tax reform. But what we were trying to do in the tax reform, it was not just to reduce the number of taxes, we reduced them twice. It was not just reducing the tax rates, and we reduced them significantly. For example, the profit tax in 2013 will be 19%. but we introduced many preferences for business. In IT technology, the profit tax will be 5% only. We introduced some preferences, and we are exempting from taxes the money which the company is spending for innovation projects, for improvements, and that allowed us to ensure such rate of economic development, deregulation. We cancelled many of the administrative acts, regulatory acts, especially in capital construction, in construction in general, which were hampering our business. And naturally, once in 2009, we had the situation when our construction industry wasn't almost operating in 2011. We, in 2011 and 12, we built twice more housing than the previous year. And that is the result and the consequence of the reforms which are implemented by the government. And we will continue reducing administrative pressure on the business. I wouldn't exaggerate the importance of the transformations being implemented in our country. We see perfectly well what are our deficiencies. Sometimes we have to make some contradictory decisions. We have many mistakes, but these mistakes because we're trying to find the way out of a very difficult economic situation. And in such situation, it's impossible to find the solution which would be without any mistake. I would like to see a person who would be able to find better solution that we managed to find in this situation that it is. I've heard about the discussion about the freedom of speech in Ukraine, and I can tell you one thing. Now, in Ukraine, we have the election campaign going on. Many political forces participate in that. All of them are the opponents to the government. And out of all these political forces which will be participating, there will be not a single ally to the government. All of them are having their election campaign based on the criticism of the government. What can I say? Where this criticism is objective, and unfortunately, I practically do not hear such criticism. We treat it absolutely normally, but most of the arguments used are based on primitive populism. We will increase the pension 3 times, we'll increase salary 3 times. In such situation, it's quite difficult to conduct the election campaign, because the most difficult thing, and European politicians know that, is to oppose populism. That's the most difficult thing to do. But I do have a big hope that Ukrainian people who survived through this test of populism for 20 years, they've heard about this populism, and they will make the correct choice at the elections, which we will have on the 28th of October, and will continue all the transformations we've started. Thank you for your attention. I'm ready to answer the questions if you have any. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I will start with my question, and then I believe we will have several questions from the audience. We have not a lot of time. I would like to start with the European question. Victor organized this meeting on Ukrainian European policy. What is your attitude to that? What is your European policy? How does that impact Ukrainian policy? Microphone. Quite an interesting question was asked. What's your attitude to European policy? And I would like to hear, is there any European policy? I answered. Okay. Then I know that Anders Aslund had a question. You're welcome. Good morning, Mr. Prime Minister. I'm pleased to see you. You mentioned several issues, but I know we've discussed the issue of corruption before. Do you believe that is that the main problem in Ukraine? You are the Prime Minister. You've been the Prime Minister for 2.5 years. Looking at international indicators, we do not see any improvements in this situation. How could you explain what would you like to do with that today? Thank you for your question. To tell you that I'm satisfied with the situation that we have in Ukraine, this would be wrong. I'm not satisfied. For me, corruption is the phenomenon that reduces the efficiency of decision-making process and of implementation of different decisions. But a lot is being done in the country about that. We cannot say that there's no improvement at all. And that's one of the stereotypes which are stuck to Ukraine. Our opponents, I will give you one example. Our opponents are saying that during the preparation to Euro 2012, during the construction of the stadiums, roads, airports, the money stole was about 40 billion hryvnias, which is about $5 billion. When I hear such things, I can tell you that I'm concerned with this process, but Ukraine spent for preparation $5 billion US, and if all the $5 billion were stolen, then how could we construct all these things? Mr. Asland, there is the problem. The government is combating it, is trying to find the ways to address it. We do not succeed in everything, but it's not of the scale that our opposition is talking about, maybe just because we do not have such resources. We received the answer on European policy. What about Russian policy?
Unlike Europe, Russia has a very definite policy towards Ukraine. Nobody would doubt that. On the one hand, what we hear is the assurances that our relations should be based on equal partnership, good neighborhood, and friendship, that we need to develop integration projects, cooperation projects, and we are all for it. We are staunch supporters of this idea. On the other hand, as I said in my presentation, we have been pressed for 2.5 years with huge, high, spiking gas prices. I'm speaking about just pressing, about strangling us with those prices, because this is what it is about. And we know what this policy targets. Everyone can understand that, and there's no need to explain such things. Mr. Azarov, perhaps we shouldn't go to Russia and beg them to reduce gas prices. We've survived for 2 years. We have survived. Mr. Kuchma, where have you ever seen President Yanukovych or Azarov begging anyone for anything? Yes.
I know our time is running up. I think on that note, before this chat between the former president and former, yes.
It was the president under whom I worked.
Let me ask Leonid Danilovich if he has any advice on his policy. Well, how the policy should be implemented.
It's okay with the gas. It's much worse without gas, actually. I believe that high gas prices have been a momentum for the industry to develop, and we push our business to think about their costs, not to consume free gas, but to think about modernizing their equipment, not to hide their profits in offshore zones, but to bring pressures to bear on the government for every company to have very clear plan for modernization and the reduction of gas consumption. And I wouldn't continue. You will understand what I mean. Do you agree? It's hard to discuss such things with my former chief and boss, but I'll tell you what I think about it. On the one hand, that could be right, but on the other hand, it isn't as easy as it might seem. The $5 billion that we pay extra every year, and I gave you the figure, the overall cost of all infrastructure objects that or projects that we constructed in preparation for the Euro 2012, it was 4,000 kilometers of roads, 4 stadia, 4 airports, and with runways, modern terminals, airport terminals. We modernized our railway, and we spent $5 billion for all of these objects. On the other hand, we have to pay $5 billion every year as this extra, as a markup on the gas price. When I think of that, I become just mad, because I could have done lots of very useful things had I not have to pay such huge prices for gas. And we have to improve energy efficiency, and that's what we are doing. So we can combine such things, and it could have been a huge impetus and momentum for our infrastructure development, for our industrial development. For those of you who are in the Crimea for the first time in their lives, you can see that this is a pearl of Ukraine and Europe, but it needs huge investment for turning into a real pearl, into a real diamond. Had we had those $5 billion timely, you wouldn't have recognized this peninsula. Yesterday, I met with a foreign delegation, and I told them that the Crimean Peninsula is unique in that it has 3 factors at play here: woods, mountains, and seashore. And the Crimean mountains are very unique. They are made of limestone, which actually consumes or takes the moisture, sea moisture. So the Crimean climate is never moist, is never wet, and this is the best possible climate for people having breathing problems, asthmatic reactions, etc. In the Soviet times, we treated to be in the Crimea within 2 months. You might have not known about it, but that's a unique corner of Ukraine, and we are interested in improving it. We have people from Sweden here. In your cold country, Mr. Bildt, you don't have anything like Crimea. Some time ago, it was in Sweden, and it was plus 14 degrees centigrade, and they were happy. But that was cold. Now they come to the Crimea, and they can see a wonderful climate, and you feel it. When it is plus 36 centigrade, you do not feel that it is very hot. In Egypt, at the same temperature, you would be dying of heat. But in the Crimea, with this sea breeze, you will be just enjoying your stay every day and every minute. Let us work together to improve infrastructure in the Crimea. I know that we have to wind up now because you are very pressed for time. Thank you very much for being with us, and I would like to thank Mr. Kuchma. I never knew that he's a wonderful journalist because he asked you very cute questions. Thank you very much. We'll see you later.
Don't have coffees or anything.